America, my name is Osei-Frimpong, and I spent this morning reading Sylvia Wynter's No Humans Involved. No Humans Involved was an essay Wynter wrote in, must have been 92. It was right after the Rodney King verdict. 92, 93. Right after the Rodney King verdict. And she was reflecting on, the uprising after the verdict and the designation that the LAPD had and the judicial officers within the LAPD when jobless black men were involved in violent altercations with the police. And the acronym that was used to describe an altercation with the police between the police officers and jobless black men was NHI, which stood for No Humans Involved. That means, if you shoot a black guy, it doesn't really count. It's like either putting down a dog or a stray or a rabid animal or something like that. No human was involved. Jobless black men were not. Were defined by their negation. They're defined as a conceptual other from what it was to be a person. They weren't necessarily positively an animal. They were just not a person. They didn't have even the content of a noble beast, a savage, or they didn't have their own ontological category. They were not humans. And, Tommy Curry kind of explored this theme a little bit farther when he said that black men were men not. They were defined by their negation of what it was to be a man because of certain 18th and 19th and 20th centuries kind of ethnographies and the way we conceived of gender. But I'm talking about Sylvia Wynter right now, and Sylvia Wynter's kind of just thoughts about what it meant that we had a juridical designation for treating young black men like not humans. By the state, by the legal apparatus treating young black men like not humans, no humans involved. And what she comes to kind of apprehend is that universities, social sciences, and humanities departments are the grammarians of the nation's ideology. They are the grammarians of the nation's ideology. They set down the rules and to some extent the nomenclature. They make it make sense. They might express an antecedent culture in the same way that grammarians kind of take a language and kind of make it make sense. But they also establish and refine rules and make sense and create standards of that language. And this is why humanities and social science departments, they also make rules for how we conceive and use and act towards each other and people, right? They express what's given in the culture at the time, but they add a little bit. And so we need to think about, in terms of humanities and the social sciences over the last 40 years, being not just complicit, but agents of the degradation of labor politics, the degradation, the uneven and even confusing movement of racial politics. I think people are more confused than they were 40 years ago about the status of themselves as a racial minority, or as the stakes of their lineage coming from native minorities, native degraded people, right? I think, black people in the 70s were less confused about what it meant to be black than black people in 2025. And I think, we have to deal with that. And what does it mean that we've had humanities departments and social science departments that have managed this confusion? And what she argues is that these departments not only create a degraded population and legitimize that degraded population, they also, that same department has it's a coin with two sides. It upholds the favored population, right? So that same education will uphold and degrade, and who's been ministering that education. And we have to look at what have been the results over the last 40 years. Like I said, I think we have a more confused labor politics than we had than prior to the 1980s. I think we have a more confused labor politics. I think we have a more confused racial politics. And if your humanities and social science departments are confusing your racial and labor politics, we have to figure out who benefits. And who benefits, I think we even have a more confused gender politics, although that's going to be a larger argument, because I think who benefits from the last 50 years of confusion is professional class white women. I think they've screwed up our universities. I think they've screwed up our universities, our humanities departments, and you could say, how could they do that? Well, they have. I think, and the think tanks, I think they've, and the nonprofits, I think they've screwed up our institutions of culture. So now the only actually organized revolt against that quality of liberalism that's taken out and that's justified and has been the grammarians of injustice. The only benefits of that have been professional class white women. So I think that instead of having the universities grow in their role as the grammarians of justice and clarifying the fights, our labor, racial, and even gender politics has suffered by universities being captured by a quality of liberalism and feminism that has made them the grammarians of injustice and has and these departments have been the vanguard of a really awful quality of labor, racial, and even gender injustice. And it's unfortunate that the only actually organized and serious revolt against them has come from the right. Now just wants to defund all the humanities departments. But they did it themselves. They could have been the grammarians of justice. But instead, when the jobs went away, they started talking about pronouns instead of jobs. NAFTA came, you should have, all the talk about pronouns should have been concerned with making sure Americans have good jobs, secure access to good jobs. But instead, we decided a lot of nonsense, right? So Wynter's argument is that we have to look at universities, and not just university departments, the humanities departments and social science departments, as integral in creating the grammar and realizing that grammar in our practices of creating disposable populations. Now, she was talking about disposable populations in terms of the global South and black men in the urban areas of the United States. But I think that same grammar has created, disposable populations, not just in the Middle East, but especially in Palestine right now. The number of well-heeled Zionists who are okay with genocide is, and the stable number of well-heeled Zionists who are okay with genocide because of, not in spite of, because of their education in the humanities and the social sciences in the United States is a problem, is a huge problem. The number of good feminists who are okay, they were okay with the war killing Russians for the sake of Ukraine, which was a dubious war, and they were okay with the Zionist war in funding the Zionist war in Israel because of their education in the humanities and social sciences. And they have horrible labor politics indifferent to the plight of just, American people, especially American men, indifferent to them because of their social science and humanities education. That number is enormous. That number is enormous, and we need to look at how the quality of feminism that took over the universities, or we can just say it took over the universities, was actually integral in creating disposable population and anesthetizing the population to actually organize to deal with our political problems. Instead of leading a labor movement, the humanities departments led people to therapy, which was a great labor movement for burgeoning therapists in the psychology industry, but wasn't particularly great for the real problems of what it meant to not have a job after NAFTA, what it meant to actually think about the political responsibilities of reorganizing the economy for still political self-determination in a world of global competition and global production. Instead of actually getting people to think about that, we got pills and therapists. And who led that charge? Humanities departments and social science departments. All the care industry. Real care would have been securing people jobs after their jobs went away and leading policies for like a federal job guarantee or like a raft of policies that feminists just don't care about because they're only half-assed in the labor market to begin with. But that's actually going to be fodder for a different show. I just want to talk to you about this essay that I think is rather lovely by Sylvia Wynter called No Humans Involved. The point of departure is a designation for black men who are assaulted by the police and how they're reported on. And it ends with an indictment of social sciences and the humanities departments as creating the ideology, of being the grammarians of the ideology, of giving clarity to an ideology that creates disposable people. And humanities and social science departments have not taken enough responsibility for the last 50 years of creating, of giving a grammar that created a rabble, a jobless rabble, a racialized rabble. Let's not pretend that humanities and social science departments have been concerned with making sure that Negro men have been made whole. Let us not pretend that. And I'm not just talking about the super predator discourse or the anodyne response to that or the complete callousness with respect to the vulnerability that black men face. Not just to police violence, but also to police violence, but also degradations in the job market. We were too busy making sure that women got their cut. All right. So thank you for your time. I'm going to go now, and I want you to read the essay. It's a nice essay. You can find parts online. If you're in charge of a class, even high school, go ahead. Assign this to your high school class. I think it's poignant because it talks about the creation of disposable populations and the university's role in creating disposable populations. And now I think in 2024 we found out what happens when white men are created as disposable by the universities. What happens is they fight back against universities. Like they're tired. They get tired and they fight back. So that's just kind of that. And where we are and who's to blame and why universities, instead of taking responsibilities for their role in our feckless labor politics and culture. It shouldn't be the case that the biggest labor leaders in the United States don't have college degrees. like the people articulating the case for labor should be everyone coming out of any sort of social science and humanities department, but instead they can't. They can just articulate the case for better pronoun usage and land use acknowledgments. I'd like to thank the Ojibwe people for dying so that I could do this show on their land. No, like that's that. I'm being facetious. The genocide was real. All right, thank you for your time, and if you appreciate what I'm doing, which I think you should, because nobody else is doing this on the internet. I can tell you that right now. Because if you're reading Sylvia Wynter, that means you're kind of pretty smart because she's a little bit abstruse in her language. But if you're smart enough to read and dissect the arguments, then you're not going to risk your job by biting the hand that feeds you, which are, the feminists who've destroyed our universities. All right. Thank you for your time, and I will end those who won't stand up to them. And thank you for your time. Go to funkyacademic.com, kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month, and I'll keep doing what I'm doing. And I'm trying to actually rehabilitate a disposable population and, help us conceive of how and the structures and institutions that have allowed us to conceive of some populations as disposable. Peace.